finally found something that looks like exactly what I've been looking for. Now, there's this thing I read years ago when I first began to study law and was in court myself on a sexual harassment case, actually a series of them, because I worked for a just evil electrical union. And so I actually was sexually harassed at almost every job. Or if I wasn't sexually harassed, I was discriminated against every single time, and my jobs would last like a week because I was a girl. So I had to learn about the law if I even going to work in that field. That's actually how I learned about the law, is just working for just some of the worst people on the face of the earth, around some of the worst, crappiest people on the face of the earth. I mean, except for Johnny Depp fans, you really couldn't get any worse than the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. But I found this resource back in the day, basically about how pretty much every single time a woman reports rape or sexual abuse to a cop, they don't believe her. Like, pretty close to every single time. And they talked about how... Oh, sorry. And again, I have PTSD. Like, I actually stopped watching the trial lately because, frankly, I won't be able to keep up with it. And I tried to watch Amber Heard starting to talk about the rape issues, and I just couldn't. It's just too hard to watch. And I'll watch it after the fact, and then I'll get caught up again. But I've been doing my homework for years, and I still have plenty to say. And most of the time, I find that the people who are actually watching these videos on YouTube haven't watched the trial either. They're just watching crackheads putting up videos because they want to make a lot of money, and it's just absolute bullshit and crap and junk by people even stupider than themselves putting up videos. And they're still just asking the same questions and talking about the same completely retarded issues. And, okay, again, a retarded person never did anything to anyone. I really hate when I use that word. I use a lot of bad words that I don't really want to use. But again, sorry, retarded people are very nice people. I meet lots of people that are bad. It's pretty much never a retarded person. So sorry about that. Okay, this resource is about sexual assault, and I'm seeing even people who are body language experts who actually might usually know what they're talking about, saying that Amber Heard is lying. And the thing is, I know something about body language. I know enough, I've kind of decided, I know enough to say when I'm watching someone who's talking about body language and they're wrong, I know enough to identify when they're wrong. To say, nope, I'm sorry, but I know the sources that this information comes from, and you're just wrong because it just can't be true. I watched this one lady who was on the History Channel doing something about body language lately, and she said Amber Heard had too many hot spots. But Paul Ekman is who, so far as I know, in modern history, he's the guy. The guy. It's Paul Ekman. He's the guy. He wrote all the books that matter. He's the guy who did all the research with tribes that now no longer are isolated. He did research at the last possible moment in the history of the world that it could be done. He's the guy, and he says the more you expect people not to believe you, the more you start not looking believable to people. And that includes body language experts. And hotspots do not matter more than evidence. I have a video here on this playlist about Johnny Depp terrorizing Amber Heard with a knife. And frankly, there's this term called dispositive in the law. If you watch that video and you still don't believe Amber Heard, it's because you didn't watch the video, or because you're on crack, or because you're one of Johnny Depp's robots, because it just answers every question. And as far as I can tell, you can't watch that video and ever have Johnny Depp win. I don't know how the hell he could possibly win. And there's a lot of people who think he will, and I wish they all just, had parents that owned a big bag of condoms. I'm going to invent a time machine and go back in time and put a condom in your daddy's hand before you're born. It's like, sorry, but you people, your parents did nothing to raise you. They did nothing at all. You're losers, you're idiots, and you're very bad people. And if you're stupid, at least keep your mouth shut. Then you'll look a lot smarter. Because there's nothing worse than calling a rape victim a liar when she's not lying. And you're going to hell, and I don't know why you're here in the first place on this earth, other than to torment good people. But anyway, let's get back on topic. I'd like to take that back, but I mean it, so I can't. I'm going to put up this resource, and it's about sexual assault. And sexual assault is a different experience, and it impacts people in a different way. And Amber Heard got pretty wonky lately during her testimony, and I just want to put up this video, and I wish I could find the original resource, but it was talking about how the way women even recount their stories is completely not in chronological order. It literally just gets implanted into their brain in a way that other things don't. And because I have PTSD, this makes sense to me. You'll just have to take it on faith. Someday, if something really awful happens to you and you have PTSD, you'll start to believe the different ways your brain can react when something really messed up happens to you. You know, like, then you'll start to understand someday when your brain gets wonky on you, what that's like and what that's about. But in the meantime, sexual assault, which Johnny Depp did to her 3 times. Oh gosh, what a piece of crap. And you people are defending him. Which he did to her 3 times. Like, that is not something that she's going to say like she talks about what she ordered for lunch.
She stops and she starts. She contradicts herself. She goes backwards and forwards. What she says doesn't make sense. Or when she's describing it, she's not crying. She's not upset. She's like totally flat.
The victim that may appear as if she may not have the story altogether.
Often survivors are asked, well, why didn't you just run out the door or tell someone or scream or say no? But what I've heard survivors talk about is feeling a sense of just frozen.
There is no typical response to sexual assault.
So victims can remember things differently. They don't necessarily remember things chronologically. They may get things out of order.
I knew from my research as a psychologist what they were actually seeing was trauma. What they were seeing was the neurobiology of trauma.
As law enforcement officers, we recognize that this is not just a job, it's a calling. Seeking justice, helping people, and making a difference are all part of what makes this profession so rewarding. More than 30 years of police work and my time as a national advisor and trainer on sexual assault have taught me that the first interaction between a law enforcement officer and a sexual assault victim will make or break our opportunities for success and justice in these cases. Our first interactions with victims also have a profound impact on a victim's ability to recover from the trauma of sexual assault, making this one of the most complex violent crimes that we respond to. Unfortunately, many of us didn't receive the in-depth training needed to respond effectively to these cases. We often misinterpreted victims' reactions to trauma, which discouraged victims from participating in the criminal justice system and resulted in offenders not being held accountable for their crimes. Much like we are more informed today about police officer trauma following critical incidents, research and experience informs us that we need to educate ourselves on the science behind sexual assault victims' reactions to trauma. Sexual assault response and investigations training has now advanced to include a trauma-informed approach to sexual assault. This will help us understand sexual assault victims' actions, responses, and their ability to recall details of the crime. In part 1 of this 2-part training, we will learn how trauma impacts victims' behavior, memory, and cognitive ability. In part 2, we'll talk about how to use what we've learned to respond more effectively in sexual assault cases. Let's start with a look at how the brain responds to trauma.
So during a traumatic situation, there are 2 basic neurobiological processes that we're interested in looking at. One is what hormones are released and how does that affect behavior during the assault and the immediate aftermath of the assault. And then what is happening with respect to the memory of that traumatic event. Most survivors are going to have one of 4 main stress chemicals released in their bodies, or some have multiple hormones and chemicals released at the time of the assault. One of which are going to be the catecholamines. Catecholamines are like natural adrenaline. It's what pumps your body up in a traumatic or stressful situation that would help a survivor be able to fight back against the attacker or try to flee from the situation. Another hormone that's often released for survivors during an assault are the corticosteroids, and those work in conjunction with the catecholamines to determine how much energy is available. So again, for some survivors, they have a lot of energy available to fight back and to flee, and they stay very pumped up after the assault. But some don't. It sort of bottoms out and flattens out on them, and they might freeze during the assault, or they might be in kind of a stupor almost after the assault. Other hormones that affect the behavior at the time of the assault are opiates, which is like natural morphine. So some survivors during the assault report feeling like they're almost drugged, that they're out of it, and then when they do first responder interviews later, they have no affect. They're just describing it with no emotion, no affect, like they're reading out of the TV guide. There's just nothing to them. That's the opiates. The opiates help block physical pain, which you need during a traumatic situation, but they also just keep blunting everything, okay? The other hormone that's sometimes released is oxytocin, and this is a hormone that promotes good feelings, okay? And that may sound strange, why would you have a hormone that's about good feelings released during a sexual assault? Again, it's about trying to block the pain, the physical pain, the psychological pain. So the body will release opiates, natural morphine, to try to tamp down the physical pain, and sometimes it will release oxytocin in conjunction with that to try to balance it out. Hormone that promotes good feelings, hormone that tries to blunt pain. Again, it's just trying to mitigate the pain of this assault. But if the oxytocin levels get a little high, sometimes survivors might laugh, giggle, smile, engage in socially appropriate behavior that's socially inappropriate given that situation.
You may see a survivor who may be very tearful. You may see a survivor who may be laughing just to get through. You may see a survivor who's maybe looks as though she's or he or she is very uncooperative, very angry or resistant.
Victims can display a huge range of emotions. They can appear to be apathetic, where an officer may think that, she should be acting differently than this. Just because they're apathetic about it doesn't mean it's not affecting them. It's just the way they're dealing with it.
We've all had the experience of talking to victims of trauma who've said and done things that didn't make sense to us. However, as we've just learned, the flood of hormones that help us survive a trauma also affect behavior during and after a traumatic event. So, what we once may have seen as confusing behavior from victims, we can now understand as actually evidence of trauma. So in addition to affecting behavior, this flood of hormones changes how the brain stores memory and how those memories are later recalled.
So those are the 4 hormones that can affect the behavior during the assault. And these hormones are really instrumental in blocking the physical pain, helping the body react to the trauma of the assault. Now here's the kicker. Those 4 hormones, very helpful in so many ways. When those 4 hormone levels are very high in the body, it interferes with other structures in your brain that are trying to lay down the neural mechanisms of the memory. So it's one of those times where our body's kind of working at cross purposes. Those hormones are really helpful for fight, for flight, for mitigating the pain,